Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar review. This one is going to be my non-spoiler review for Toph Beifong's Metalbending Academy. This is of course the second Avatar one-shot comic from Dark Horse, following on from the first one, which was Katara and the Pirate Silver, which was released a few months ago, and then this one will be followed by the third Avatar one-shot, which was just recently announced, Suki Alone. That's coming out in June, I believe. So yeah, I got a review copy for Toph Beifong's Metalbending Academy, so thank you to Dark Horse for approving that, and just to make it clear that that's how I have the book, that's what's going on here, but you guys know I'm going to give my honest opinion on this, if I had to buy the book myself or if I got it from Dark Horse. So, how is this second one-shot? I think it's important to address the context of the fact that the nature of Avatar comics has changed with these one-shots. They are now doing this sandbox style approach. They've stopped for now doing the comic trilogies after Imbalance. So I don't know how long this is going to go on for, but at the very least we're getting this initial trilogy focusing on the female characters, and then we're going to be, I suppose, potentially going into another trilogy with a different theme. And we'll see where we go from there. So the first one, Katara and the Pirate Silver, from a few months back, was fine, but ultimately I don't think quite lived up to expectations. In my mind, they locked themselves a little bit too tightly into a very small box, setting it during a very specific point during book 2, basically the only point they could set it in given the details of the story, and it meant that there was very little they could do in terms of major takeaways for the character. So it was cool, Katara being awesome Katara, but that was really about it from the book. It was fun, well written, high quality comic as usual, but it kind of just came and went in terms of like discussion and how much sort of notable content there was from it. Toph Beifong's Metalbending Academy, when it got revealed, immediately looked like, okay, this is going to be a better book because it's set during the comic timeline. From my reading of it, it looks like it's set after the Rift, and I believe they have also said, Dark Horse have said, it is set after the Rift. I personally couldn't get anything out of the book that made it clearer exactly where it's set, but my guess is just that it's a few months after the Rift, based on the line Sokka says, and beyond that I think it's just kind of very difficult to be like, oh, it's set before or after Imbalance or something like that, but either way, after the Rift makes sense. So let's quickly cover the description of this book, just in case you have no idea what this book actually is. So the description reads, "For some, perfection just isn't enough. Things are looking bright at the Beifong Metalbending Academy, but after all the adventures Toph's had with Aang, Sokka, Zuko, and Katara, the whole thing feels a bit dull. Luckily, Sokka and Suki come to visit and reintroduce some familiar faces from their wandering days, and while out and about to celebrate, Toph discovers something that just might put the sparkle back in her eye." So, interesting plot premise there that I think roughly makes sense. Now, preview pages have obviously come out last week, so if you're caught up on them, you'll know exactly the dynamic that they go for right at the start of this book, of everything is going perfectly at the Beifong Metalbending Academy, the training for everyone is going well, finances are in order, she's upgraded the buildings, Hotun, Penga, and the Dark One, her first 3 students, are now teaching. There's very little for Toph to do. She has people doing everything. The school basically runs itself, which should be great. She built this very successful academy. But she's bored. She's really, really bored because she's used to saving the world with Team Avatar or being the blind bandit at the Earth Rumble event. She's had a very eventful years of her life just before what's happening here, and she's not used to things being so stable and calm. And this book is sort of about addressing, like, is she okay with that? Does she just need to have a little bit of excitement and then she can calm down? Is there a problem? Does she need to step away from the academy? There's a few things that like you're kind of wondering like what's going to be the takeaway from this book. And ultimately, I quite like how they handle this, in that the thing that obviously the preview suggests puts a sparkle back in her eye is that after she goes to the concert that Chong and the Nomads perform, that's what Sokka and Suki do to try and sort of cheer her up, bring the excitement back. After that, she finds an underground bending tournament happening in a nearby warehouse. This is the thing that sort of, gets the book sort of rolling, is that all of a sudden the nostalgia comes back. Where did Toph, really refine her skills as a bender? She learned from the Badger Moles, but she refined them against other benders at the Earth Rumble. A very important part of her life, becoming the Blind Bandit. That's where we properly, I suppose, got introduced to her in terms of at her as the character we know her as. But look at where she is now. And this book is sort of about that sort of contrast of the sort of crazy nature of how she came to be the best earthbender in the world versus now. The best earthbender in the world feels like she's almost wasted training people in basic metal bending. And where does she go from here? Is she okay with the academy just being successful and her being the one who runs it? Or does something need to change? And I think one of the best things about this book is that they don't go down the simplistic route of, Toph participates in the tournament, fights a bunch of people, and is happy at the end of the book. That would have been fine and would have fulfilled what some people want out of the book in terms of just Toph beating up people all the time. But instead, and what I really liked that Faith Erin Hicks did in this book was utilize the fact that Toph is more than just the best earthbender in the world. That she does have all these other elements to her. And so probably one of my favorite parts of this book is that they kind of bring up quite heavily the fact that, Toph was forged into the best earthbender in the world through these Earth Rumbles. That it wasn't just that the Lion Turtle thought her and she immediately came out like fully formed as this bender. No, it was going up against all those unique earthbenders at the Rumble where she, got to the level that she's at. And she got even better over the course of the series. And so there's this, she views it as like good times, and maybe a return to something like this is the way to go. But it doesn't end up happening. It kind of seems like the story is taking her in the direction where maybe she will participate in the tournament. But no, stuff gets in the way. Her reputation, I suppose, has changed. She's no longer the Blind Bandit. She is known worldwide as one of the people who saved the world. She is known as the person who runs the formal Metalbending Academy. She can't go back to being that rebellious character because she's kind of too well known. So people at the underground tournament who see her are like, oh no, the man is here to shut down the tournament. That they view her as someone who stopped the war, as someone who's like official, because she's, associated with Aang as the Avatar. And that was a very interesting dynamic to see of like, that's what's restricting her from taking part in the tournaments. So the question is like, where does the book actually go from there? If she's not participating in the tournaments, what's the significance of them? And that's where like a lot of the other stuff comes into play. Like the preview says Sokka and Suki are in the book. They are, but they're mainly in the book to introduce Chong into the story. The book really doesn't, I wouldn't say, have a side plot about Sokka and Suki, but it makes sense that they're the ones to introduce Chong to Toph. That's fine. That they more or less just appear in the preview pages that we've seen, and then a little bit towards the end. The side plot of this book is more about Toph's students, so Hotun, Penga, and the Dark One. And their reaction to seeing a sort of frustrated Toph with what's going on, and them questioning like, is it something we've done or what? And I really like how Faith Erin Hicks wrote the trio here. They were a little bit criticized when The Promise came out because they were sort of one-note characters to a degree. They all had their one character trait, and that kind of defined them. Now, I think Gene Yang himself corrected that almost straight away, in that their second appearance in the Rift immediately made them more nuanced characters, added seriousness to them, and they're actually, pretty cool and interesting characters, given that they are Metalbender number like 2, 3, and 4 in the Avatar universe. Significant characters who are now training most of the new Metalbenders. So significant characters. And here, once again, they're even more nuanced. They specifically note how, through being at the academy, interacting with Toph and each other and becoming teachers, that a lot of their really strong initial character traits are kind of almost beginning to fade away a little bit. That, Hotun is no longer all about doom. The Dark One doesn't really hate everything anymore. And Penga's not all about, shopping and boys or whatever it was that she was focused on. Instead, they kind of have matured, but they kind of in a way have a sort of similar arc to Toph, where they almost feel like, oh, we need to prove ourselves. Like, they feel like Toph proved herself at the underground tournaments. I heard there's underground tournaments in the going on in the town. Why don't we participate in them? So that's sort of where the plots kind of intertwine again. Again, this is all relatively early in the book in terms of like where the book actually goes. The core of the book, in terms of I think what will end up being the most interesting stuff, is a pretty long sequence of conversation between Toph and Chong. Very kind of odd characters to suddenly have as like a central character discussion in the book, but it's really well written because it gives character development to Toph, but it also gives character development to Chong, related to the fact that, Chong has a band that sells tickets to performances. That seems very kind of like mainstream, like formal, like making money from something he's really interested in. That doesn't seem like Chong based on what we knew of him. And they addressed that in this conversation with Toph, and kind of used that as a springboard into sort of what Toph is dealing with as well. That, something she loves to do has sort of been changed by the fact that it's in such a formal setting anymore. It's no longer this, underground thing anymore. And, just addressing how they can both sort of be comfortable and find the right balance of not sort of ruining their passion for what they're interested in. And again, this is probably where the one major spoiler of the book sort of comes in, of like what really drives Toph to, be sort of interested in something beyond just, fighting people. It was a big surprise to see this thing happen in the book. And by the end of the book, this is the thing where I'm most like, can we actually come back to this? I'd love to see a follow-up to this book, to see how they address the Academy going forward with this involved. Again, I'm talking vaguely about it, but I don't want to spoil it because the book's not out for a while. So that's sort of like the core of it, is just that conversation between Toph and Chong acting as the thing that really, opens both characters' sort of eyes to the situation. Obviously, it builds up to a situation where like everyone's sort of at the pro-bending the underground bending tournament, and kind of the book sort of wraps up from there. I will say that as much as it's a big improvement over Katara and the Pirate Silver, I still don't really think that this necessarily is going to be the book that really like blows people away. I think the one-shots have the potential to do some really important stuff. I think a 72-page comic like this can tell an important story. They just have to have sort of the ambition to go through with it. It's much more like what we want, and now that we know the third one-shot is going to be about Suki, set in a really interesting time period with an interesting character, again, it seems like they're moving in the right direction. So immediately it does seem like they are kind of improving, growing with each one of these one-shots, and hopefully we can eventually maybe hit on some of the more impactful stories that we kind of want to see covered. Like, why can't we go back and tell some of Iroh's backstory that we don't know about? why can't we have a book that covers, say, Zuko and where Druk comes from? Is it the Ancient Sun Warrior artifact? Is it a dragon egg? When does that story happen? When does Aang find the other Sky Bison? Again, it's kind of weird because they have moved from the trilogies that advance the story going forward to more of the sandbox style approach, and it's hard to tell what is kind of limited and what they can't do or what they can do. This feels better because while I don't think you would immediately come out of this book and say that Toph, everything is set up going forward, there's a few little lines of dialogue throughout this that sort of tease and, you know, very early suggest like the path that Toph ends up taking kind of later on in life. And I kind of quite like that they did that. And I think that's probably the main thing I'd praise this book for, is just a bit more nuanced character writing than, say, the first book with Katara, or even what Faith Erin Hicks did in Imbalance, where, you know, I don't think the characters grew that much in Imbalance, but here there's like a sense of like, you can really tell she knows the characters, understands Toph really, really well, and is sort of setting a decent amount in place for Toph, that if they ever commit to telling the story of, like, you know, how Toph eventually goes on to become the chief of police, like, where does that come from? You can use, I think, aspects of this book in that. So I think I'm going to wrap it up there. I don't want to go on too long or touch on too many of the specifics of this book, given that it's not out yet, of course, and won't be out until February. But I wanted to give you guys some sense of more about what the book actually is. Now, I do think in this review I did primarily focus on just what we know from the previews, and just gave you a slight sense of, structure-wise, what's going on in the book. So in terms of final recommendations here, I would say, like, if you were really let down by Katara and the Pirate Silver, I think you should give Toph Beifong's Metalbending Academy a shot. I think it is much more along the lines of what we want, and I think most fans will get a lot more out of this one than that book. So hopefully it is just a situation that they had maybe a very set idea for that first book, and they've opened the door a lot more with the future ones. So yeah, they're my non-spoiler thoughts on Toph Beifong's Metalbending Academy. We're going to be waiting quite a while to do spoiler thoughts, of course, because the book isn't out until February. So, you know, we're going to be waiting for that. But hopefully this has given you guys a better preview of what this book is going to be. So if you have any questions or thoughts on the review, definitely leave them in the comments below. I'll answer them if I can. Of course, I'm not going to reveal any of the spoilers or quote specific bits. That's not the point of these kind of non-spoiler reviews. It's just to give you a sense ahead of time. But yeah, that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.